I think we are. I think we are going to start. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Luigi Del Puerto. I'm the publisher and editor of the Arizona Capital Times. The Arizona Capital Times, of course, covers state government and public policy. And if you don't have a subscription, do let me know. I'm going to get you squared away. We have a great subject this morning. As you know, as we all know, Arizona faces a drier climate, a dwindling supply of the Colorado River water, wildfires, and the flooding that follows. The state also grapples with, among other things, questions surrounding clean energy, urbanization, the environment. The question, therefore, in many people's mind is Arizona sustainable? I think what you'll hear from the panelists today is that Arizona has the opportunity to craft quite a sustainable future. The other questions are, therefore, what are Arizona's strategies to sustain our economic vibrancy amidst these challenges? What infrastructures should we invest in? But before we discuss these things, I want to thank our sponsors this morning for engaging this way. Without their support, we would not be able to hold public policy discussions such as the one we are having today. The co-sponsors of today's morning scoop are the Center for the Future of Arizona and the Nature Conservancy of Arizona. The Center for the Future of Arizona is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that brings together Arizonans to create a stronger and brighter future for our state by advancing priorities that Arizonans say matter most to them. One of these priorities, of course, is a sustainable future. CFA hopes that this morning's conversation will prompt the state's leaders, policymakers, and of course, cross-sector experts to inform policy, practice, and investments to drive the changes that we want to see and that will carve a path toward a flourishing, sustainable future. Again, thank you to the Center for the Future of Arizona. The Nature Conservancy is a global environmental nonprofit organization that is working to create a world where people and nature can thrive. In our state, Nature Conservancy has protected more than 1.5 million acres of lands, harnessed science and partnerships to keep rivers flowing, forests and grasslands healthy, and of course, led efforts to ensure both rural and urban communities prosper. Of course, continuing to support a healthy Arizona requires shared leadership. Most recently, the Nature Conservancy led the formation of the Arizona Thrives, a statewide alliance, charting a path forward on a common vision of a clean energy economy. At this point, please allow me to introduce Dr. Sybil Francis. Dr. Francis is founding member and president and CEO of the Center for the Future of Arizona. She brings her passion for creating positive change, her love of our state, and her considerable prior national public policy experience to her leadership at the center. Prior to being named president and CEO in 2018, she served as executive director of CFA from 2002 to 2018, during which time she led key initiatives in education, workforce, and civic engagement, and of course, grew the organization's programs. Welcome, Sybil. Please share with us more about what the Center for the Future of Arizona does and why you have chosen to sponsor this program today.
Thank you so much, Luigi, for that wonderful introduction. And congratulations again to you and the Morning Scoop for providing this really great service to all of us in Arizona and bringing important and timely topics to the table for discussion. So thank you. And today's topic, does Arizona have a sustainable future? As you said, of course, is especially timely given what we've been experiencing over the last year plus. And the Center for the Future of Arizona is very pleased to sponsor this event and to have the opportunity to shed light on the important issues of the day, including today's topic. We're especially pleased to be joined by the Nature Conservancy of Arizona in sponsoring the morning's discussion, and that TNC's CEO, Danteller, is serving on the panel. TNC has done remarkable work in bringing stakeholders together across the state in ensuring that Arizona is a place where people and nature thrive together. So as you mentioned, Luigi, CFA's objective is to spark data-informed decision-making and action on the things that are most important to Arizonans and to Arizona's future. And today's topic certainly qualifies for that. CFA is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization whose mission is to bring Arizonans together to create a stronger and brighter future for our state. And we do our work in a number of ways. First, we listen to Arizonans about what matters most to them for Arizona's future, including a unique partnership with Gallup, which I'll touch on briefly in a moment. We share trusted data about how we're doing on those issues that Arizonans care about. We identify important challenges and opportunities that need to be addressed. And finally, we work with communities and leaders across the state to help them identify issues that matter to them and to support them in creating the change they want to see. So I want to get back to Gallup. One important way that we listen to Arizonans is to find out what matters most to them is through this unique partnership that we have with the Gallup organization. Some of you may know that we recently released the results of our second decennial Gallup Arizona survey that asked Arizonans what they thought were the most important issues on which we needed to take action for Arizona's future. And through this survey, we discovered that Arizonans agree on much more than we disagree on the most important issues facing our state, including in the area of jobs, healthcare, a sustainable future, education, civic engagement, and other issues. And through this work, we identified 7 shared public values in each of these areas and 42 actions supported by at least 70% of Arizonans across the state. And this level of support is really astounding. And it really applies regardless of age, income, geography, political affiliation, or race and ethnicity. So a very robust set of findings. And this level of agreement among Arizonans may be surprising to some of you, given how polarized our national narrative is, but these are very robust findings. And all of these findings taken together form the basis of the Arizona we want, which is a shared vision of success based on what matters most to Arizonans that express their highest aspirations and hopes for the future. And you can find the report, The Arizona We Want, The Decade Ahead, on our website at arizonafuture.org. So for the purposes of today's discussion with regard to Arizona's future, our survey found that Arizonans overwhelmingly love Arizona's natural beauty, want to protect it, and want sustainable practices that protect our air, land, and water, and support a high quality of life for all. And you'll see in a moment that Luigi will share more specifics about those findings and that on which our conversation will be based today. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion around where we are and how we create a sustainable future for Arizona. So thank you again to the panelists, and thank you, Luigi, and I look forward to the conversation. I'll turn it back to you, Luigi.
And thank you for Dr. Francis. We have a great panel this morning. Joining us is State Representative Tim Dunn, who represents Legislative District 13 and chairs the House Land, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs Committee. Representative Dunn was first appointed to the Arizona House of Representatives in 2018 to represent the constituents from Yuma, Buckeye, El Mirage, Glendale, Goodyear, Litchfield Park, Surprise, Walton, and Wickenburg. He is a lifelong resident of Yuma. He operates a family-run business, Dunn Grain Company Incorporated, which specializes in selling grain and exporting crops like garbanzo beans, black-eyed peas, Sudan grass, and wheat. He was named the 2017 Arizona Farm Bureau Farmer of the Year. He has been an active voice on county issues related to agriculture. In 1999, the Yuma County Chamber of Commerce awarded him Agricultural Person of the Year. He was also appointed by the governor to the Arizona Department of Agriculture Advisory Board from 2006 to 2011, and then he served as chairman in 2009. In addition to his service on his board, he served on various state and national committees over the years. Representative Dunn is a University of Arizona graduate with a bachelor's degree in agronomy. Representative Dunn, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Also joining us this morning is Dr. Christopher Boon, who is the Dean and Professor of the School of Sustainability at Arizona State University. Dr. Boon's research contributes to ongoing debates in sustainable urbanization, environmental justice, vulnerability, and global environmental change. He's a scientist for the urban long-term ecological research projects based in Baltimore and Phoenix. He sits on the scientific steering committee for the Urbanization and Global Environmental Change Project. He's an active contributor to Future Earth, which is an international initiative that aims to integrate the global environmental change community with a focus on sustainable outcomes. He also serves on the executive committee of the Council of Environmental Deans and Directors. He's the author of 2 books on urban sustainability and is the associate editor for the journals Frontiers in Ecology and Current Research on Cities. He also serves on the editorial board of the International Journal of Sustainable Development and Environmental Justice. Dr. Boon, thank you for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Also joining us is Mike Peale, who is the statewide sustainability director of Local First Arizona, which is a nonprofit organization that is committed to community and economic development throughout our state. Michael has more than 15 years of experience in sustainability program development, local business, and nonprofit support services with a focus on sustainability planning and project implementation. as well as grant writing and research. He's a native of Tucson. He has been recognized and awarded multiple distinctions and honors, including Tucson 40 Under 40, Tucson 2030 District Changemaker Award, and the U.S. Green Building Council Volunteer of the Year. He received his BA in Government and Leadership from Claremont McKenna College, his Master of Education in Educational Leadership from Northern Arizona University, and is currently a doctoral candidate at Arizona State University, focused on community engagement and equity in sustainability. He previously served as government relations officer for Pima Community College. Mike, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
And finally joining us this morning is Danteller, who is the state director for the Arizona chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Dan previously served as deputy state director for Arizona since 2016, a role in which he oversaw a team of about 44 conservation staffers working across the state and contributing to strategic planning. He has spent his career in the nonprofit conservation sector across North America, as well as globally. He previously worked for the Center for Resource Conservation and the Earth Institute for Columbia University, where he managed international water policy and conservation work. While there, he spent time in India, Brazil, and Mali, and greatly deepened his appreciation for the role that the environment plays in people's lives, and as well as livelihood. His passion, of course, for conservation started in the mountains of northern New England as a child, and was solidified when he lived in Alaska. Dan, thank you for joining us this morning. How many years did you live in Alaska, and do you miss the cold?
I lived there just 3 years, and it took a little while, but I would definitely say I greatly prefer the heat and sunshine of Arizona to the cold of Alaska.
Thank you again. I want to share with you a slide from the Gallup survey that the Center for the Future of Arizona conducted in partnership with, of course, with the Gallup organization. As you can see here, there is broad agreement on a wide array of things about what kind of a sustainable future we want. 92% agree that we need to preserve and protect our rivers, natural areas, and wildlife. 85% want to put regulations in place to protect rural water supplies. 85% agree with increased spending and measures to prevent forest fires on state land. 84% agree with reducing the heat island in our urban areas by planting trees and creating cooler outdoor walkways. 82% want to protect and expand open space for parks and outdoor recreation, something that I think Arizona has done a pretty good job in. 80% want to improve air quality, and of course, 74% want to transition to clean energy. I want to make sure you are seeing the screen that I'm sharing, correct? Perfect. Again, thank you for the CFA and the Gallup survey for these findings. Not really surprising. I want to ask our panelists, their takeaway. Let me just start with Dan. When you look at these broad agreements, what really comes to your mind?
Thanks, Luigi, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really looking forward to the discussion as well. So I think, as you said, to us, it was great to see those numbers, but it was not really a surprise to see kind of the really overwhelming agreement and the prioritization of the environment and the health of our communities and the state. That's something we really see all the time at the Nature Conservancy. We are fortunate to own a number of properties, and we have tens of thousands of visitors to those properties from all over the state. The people come to our properties, but also we work with a really diverse array of constituents that are interested in conservation and that have a passion for preserving and protecting the special parts of Arizona, and that includes farmers and ranchers. It includes the business community that we really work with through Arizona Thrives, and just an array of partners. So I think it was great to see those numbers, and kind of backs up something that we see all the time in the communities that we work with.
Well, thank you for that. Representative Dunn, I want to go to you, sir, but I want to slightly modify the question. You can see the broad agreement. Again, no surprises there. But I do want to ask you, we are dealing with some really big challenges. And sometimes when I think about them, they seem pretty dreadful. But the question that is before us in this panel is, does Arizona have a sustainable future? I want to get your take on that one, sir.
Thank you. Yes, I believe we have a sustainable future. I think as you look we've started in the desert. We've grown what we have today in the desert, and that didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without planning for the future. Starting clear back whenever before the CAP was done, and whenever you were just in farming. So I think as you look at the challenges we're facing now, these are new and very, very dear challenges. But I think if you look at the Gallup poll and what came through that, people know that they need to protect our rural water supplies. They want to protect our forest, and that kind of ties back into water. Whenever you start protecting your forest from fires and having a healthy forest, you get more water coming into the SRP system. So I think there's some more parks and those kind of things. Some of the stuff as you're hearing a tier 1 shortage, you might not be able to plant more trees as much in the future as you're in the short term until we get some more water. But yeah, with proper planning, and we get into more of those details about the future, we do have a good future because Arizonans have done this in the past to get us to where we're at, to the growth we've had, and we can do it in the future.
Right. And of course, the CAP canal really is the product of long-term thinking on the part of our state leaders. Mike, I guess same question to yourself.
Thank you. So I'm encouraged when I work at Local First Arizona with all the collaboration that goes on between local businesses and nonprofits and municipalities and utilities. Our mission at Local First is to build equitable systems for Arizona's local businesses and communities so that we can create a vibrant and inclusive and sustainable Arizona economy. And so with that said, I think that the results they're not surprising in one way, but I think that we'll have to factor in the realities that we're seeing at the state level. And we're seeing that the announcement about Lake Mead is a significant challenge and opportunity. I think we need to consider what we're going to do to plan for it. If we plan for it well with concerted efforts amongst different communities across the state and stakeholders across the state, then we can get somewhere that we need to get to quickly. This is a very serious situation. For Arizona, that means a cut of 500,000 plus acre feet from our 2022 delivery of Colorado River water. So thinking about that as top of mind, but also at Local First, we're educating businesses on what they can do, how they can conserve, how they can be working on a day-to-day basis on their actions, their footprint, across from water to energy to waste. And so there's much that we're doing in that arena around sustainability, education, and action. We're all needing to play a role.
Thank you for that, Mike. Dr. Boon, I want to ask you a more specific question, sir. When you look at sustainability, how would you exactly define it? What really does a sustainable future for Arizona look like?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that, because a lot of people misinterpret sustainability as just environmental good housekeeping, when of course it's more than that. Sustainability is ultimately rooted in the idea that this planet's going to go on with or without us. And so we need to focus on human well-being, both for this generation and for future generations, and do it in ways that are fair and just, while looking after the ecosystems that we rely on to support us. So it needs to include both that human well-being, that fairness component, and that conservation, environmental protection. All three have to be part of the definition. If they're not, it's not sustainability, it's something else.
If I can kind of break it down, as we're looking at future innovations, future technology, we have to balance that with the fact that some of those might be very expensive and the kind of investments that we need. We have to make sure that they're in fact affordable so people can deploy those technologies. Am I understanding your definition of sustainability correctly, sir?
Well, that's certainly part of it as well. So when we think about innovation, we tend to think of it as an inherently good thing, but in many ways, innovation has gotten us to the challenges that we face now. So we need to be thinking about innovation in terms of, is it responsible? Is it responsible to the people that we're trying to care for? Is it responsible to the environment that we're trying to protect? And is it responsible not just for the current generation, but for future generations? And I think that idea of fairness between generations is a really, really important concept and idea, and a motivator for sustainability. Most of us want better lives for our children, our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews, whatever the case might be. And so thinking about what we can do to ensure that when this conversation happens 100 years from now, that we're in a position where our those generations will be thanking us for the foresight that we had at the time. So, one of my very good friends, who's a native Hawaiian, says, you should ask yourself, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? What kind of ancestor do you want to be remembered as? And I think that's a really, really important idea.
Well, thank you for that. That was quite deep. Representative Dunn, let's talk about water. We know that we now have a tier 1 declaration, which means really for the CAP, that's a 30% cut in their Colorado River water allocation. That cut is going to hammer the agricultural users in central Arizona, mostly in the Pinal County area. Talk to us about what's been happening in this arena. We know for a fact that the tier 2 and tier 3 are probably going to come. They're probably going to happen quicker than we anticipate. This tier 1 declaration is not in, it's not a surprise. We've been anticipating this one. We've been planning on this. We have a plan in place, but talk to us about where we're at.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, everything's ratcheting up a lot faster than we planned. But you go back to the last 15, 20 years, we've been planning it. We've been putting, water into the ground. We've been storing water. The DCP, now they're with the 10% probability they're going to go into tier 3. They actually have forced consultations that are being between the Western states. So basically, as we look to the future, you need to plan on those cuts coming out and not relying on the Colorado River. You need to go back into using the plans that we had in place, building the infrastructure to get the water back out of the ground that we stored. So there is a plan, and the plan is not to just be relying on the Colorado River, because you have to plan on that being cut to be a tier 3. So, but that doesn't mean you have to, what's going to happen. The Metroplex is going to build their infrastructure out and be able to backfill the current losses of water. We're going to be, if at the legislature, we allocated $160 million for looking for new resources of water. We're going to be looking at within Arizona as far as some additional groundwater, desalting water on the West Valley, desalting water in Mexico. Those conversations have already been happening with the director. He's already been down with Mexico. So these things have been going on for the last 10, 15 years. It's just going to take infrastructure, more money to be put in by all of us as we plan to go forward. And, the cost of water is going to go up, and it's just a matter of not necessarily, do you want it? It's just going to cost more, and we can get there. We'll be able to continue to provide the water for those that are here now. And it'll be a planned growth, but it's not going to be just relying on the Colorado River water. It's going to be relying on other new sources, and with the technology that we have, that's going to be good for the environment.
Oh, thank you for that. There was a question about what the tier systems are. Anybody want to, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 declarations of what they might mean? Anybody want to take that one up, Dan or Mike?
I am happy to start with the tier 1 cutback. That means fully 1/3 of our annual allocation under existing water agreements, which could then lead to more punitive tier 2 cuts that await in 2023, affecting Tucson and other cities that depend on cap flows, and then could go beyond that. So very serious what's going on here, given that we're looking already at 1/3 of our annual allocation. There's clearly a need to, again, like what I was saying earlier, have a concerted effort around prioritization of what needs to be done to have the impact we need to have for conserving and for doing everything we can. We're thinking about agriculture when we're thinking about its impact on small farms as well, and what that means for larger farms coming in from out of state. And there's a lot that could be done for policy as well. And what are the policy implications? Arizona Republic ran a great story late 2019 on the mega farms and their impact on the water tables. And I think that there's a lot to be explored. This is a deep issue. It affects us all, and water is life, and there's equity issues to be considered. We need to think about tribal representation. Equity always factors into everything that we do at Local First Arizona, and we have to make sure that all stakeholders are represented and really at the table for what the current plans are to be done for meeting the current needs.
And I do want to point out that tier 1 declaration doesn't cut. We have a tiered system in terms of water rights in Arizona, of course, and that means that certain people will get cut first before others. A tier 1 declaration does not apply to residential water, for example. So you may not necessarily see an immediate increase in your water cost, for example, if you're a residential user. But make no mistake about it, as the water supply dwindles, that means the per unit price of water is definitely going to go up. Dan, we're thinking about the Colorado River water supply, but of course, that's not the only focus when you think about water. Colorado River, as Representative Dunn mentioned, is not our only source of water supply. Local entities have their own local sources of water supply, and how they manage that, of course, is another layer of analysis. What are you thinking when you hear tier 1, 30% cut out of CFA's water allocation?
Well, so, first I would say we really agree with, I think the analysis of the other panelists in general about the severity of some of these cuts, and not only what we see now, but what is very likely coming with regard to the Colorado River. So I agree completely with the need to really emphasize focus there. In addition, there are, of course, lots of other sources of water and other rivers in the state. Phoenix, we get a lot of water from the Salt and Verde systems, and the health of those is very important. And then, in Southern Arizona, for example, there's the San Pedro River. There was a news story the other day about a MOU that was signed between the city of Sierra Vista, Cochise County, BLM, and Fort Huachuca. And the Nature Conservancy had a lot of work behind the scenes in that for years. And, that was, I think it's fair to say, kind of historically a lot of antagonistic relationship and some conflict around water use. And the MOU is really going to help them move forward in a collaborative manner and make good local decisions that will both benefit the communities, the city of Sierra Vista and the fort, as well as the river and water for nature. So I think the point that I would just make is certainly the emphasis on the Colorado River is critical. And in parallel to that, there's really great local decisions that can be made in local collaboration that can have a strong impact on water use in the future.
Thank you for that. Representative Dunn, I want to ask you, because you're a farmer, the needs of farmers. If the farmers in Yuma are not going to be as affected as the farmers in Pinal County, for example. But how do you anticipate, future cutbacks? Well, first of all, how do you deal with the current tier 1 declaration? What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, we used to have a farm in Central Arizona. My uncle was in there back in the 80s, when they were farming and pumping around when the CAP was built. And so they were dealing with this when the CAP was coming in with water shortages and water cuts. And so it's something that farmers are used to. And so we're always conserving, and we're always trying to do what's most economical for the crop. When you have two different systems. When you come onto the river in the Yuma area, for those of you don't know that, 90% of the lettuce in the country comes from Yuma County from November to April. We do 2 crops a year. We were at 90% efficiency. So there's a lot of things that we're already doing correctly. And as you start having these tier 2 and tier 3 cuts, and we start taking fallowing and stuff, we'll be probably fallowing some of the other crops first. Some of the higher water use crops that we won't be using, that alfalfa and those other sedan crops will come from a different place. They just have to, the dairies and those people will just have to pay a higher price for that freight. So, we'll do everything we can to make sure we can continue to produce produce for the country out of Yuma. But as you start looking at those cuts, it's really, we're just having to make sure those decisions. And people, in the past, it's been that the Metroplex in the central part of Arizona would want to come and try to get water off the river because it's cheaper. But if you look at the tier 1 and the tier 3 declarations, you could take all the water off the river and it's not going to fix the potential cutbacks in what's going to happen. So we have to look at other sources, so we can continue to have 90% of lettuce coming from Yuma and continue to do those conservation measures in there in central Arizona, get other sources of water, because the Colorado River system is not going to, you cannot decimate this infrastructure just to patch something for a short term because it's cheaper. And so that's our message continually from the river, but because there's other ways we can make sure that we can have new sources of water without just making it come from the Colorado River, buying it from Yuma County. So, but because I think people still want to eat lettuce in the wintertime, they don't want to have to wait if they can come from Mexico or not. So but yeah, we've been working on this for years. Farmers know they're going to have to be cut. We are looking for higher value crops. those alfalfa farms growing alfalfa goes to a dairy that, over 95% of the milk on the shelves in Arizona come from local dairies. So yeah, they're growing alfalfa, but that alfalfa products go into a dairy that you guys are drinking the milk out of. So it's a system.
And thank you for that. I started out by with kind of a pessimistic tone when we look at these challenges and how large they are, and I said they might be dreadful. But if you look at human progress, for example, just in the last 50 to 100 years, there is a lot of optimism. I just want to cite a couple of things to kind of set the tone for that. We have fewer wars today than we had in the 20th century. Almost 5 billion people now live in countries where the GDP has increased more than fivefold over 50 years. We have seen global poverty fall. Some estimates say that between 2005 and 2010, the number of poor people around the world fell by nearly 500 million. This reduction in poverty is of a magnitude unparalleled in history. Life expectancy is higher today than it ever was. In 1950, for example, the length of schooling the person could typically expect to receive was around 2.59 years. In 2017, it's 8 years. I'm mentioning all these things because the initiatives that we'll delve into next, they're not pie in the sky initiatives. They're really feasible, and long-term planning does produce long-term positive results. So, and with that, I want to ask Dean Boon. Dean, set for us, what kind of thinking do we need as a society to really carve out a sustainable path? I guess another way of asking it is, what probably needs to change in the way we view things?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when you look at the way that we've tended to treat these ideas, including in all forms of institutions, whether it's private business, government, or nonprofits, a lot of the early work was focused on issues of how do we do less bad, right? How do we do less harm? It's almost like a Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. And I think that's important and useful. But if we're really going to achieve these goals, and you talked about some really audacious goals, we need to flip that thinking away from it being a burden that we have to bear to looking for the opportunity sets that it provides. So there's been some estimates that if we achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which includes no poverty, which includes gender equality, which includes healthy ecosystems, not only would it be great for us and our health and for the integrity of the planet, but there's a $17 trillion opportunity built into that as well. So there are business opportunities, there's social entrepreneurship opportunities to actually achieve these things that we all want. So, but I think it does start with changing the nature of the conversation. Yes, there are some serious issues that we look after, but I think of serious issues in two ways. One, never waste a crisis, right? And secondly, think of these as teachable moments. So what we're dealing with Lake Mead now is a teachable moment. It's an opportunity for people in the state of Arizona to learn more about where the water comes from, how it's used, and then hopefully not just to frighten people, because I don't think that works. What we need to do is inspire people by saying we just need to be smarter. And what we're looking for is some really interesting, innovative ways to tackle these issues and solve them. So it's a mindset framing that I think is really important. That shift, it's already happening, but we need to encourage it more.
Yeah, and what I have seen in the shift in thinking is that whereas before when we think about sustainability, and maybe we still do to a certain extent today, we think about the don'ts, right? Don't pollute the rivers. Mm-hmm. Don't put plastic in the oceans. All those do not. And I think what we're seeing, I would say especially in the last 10, 15, 20 years is a shift toward, okay, what should we do? What can we do? What kind of solutions do we have? And with that, I want to go to Mike. Mike, tell us one or two projects that Local First has that are really geared toward sustainability.
Glad to. So on a very encouraging note, and to follow up on the point about sustainable development goals and bigger frameworks, there's a lot going on within any one business project that we support that I'm happy to share. So one example is we work with the YWCA Southern Arizona on upgrading their facilities and reaching national goals, the 2030 districts goals for reducing by 50% or more with energy, water, and transportation emissions within buildings and within a whole district within a community. And so it's encouraging to me that they've committed to those goals and the SDGs Sustainable Development Goals, so that there's a whole plan now in place there to reach those goals and achieve cost savings and reduce their carbon footprint and be able to connect with the community around them to educate about what they're doing around energy and water and transportation. And so that's one example. And then another example with our Scale Up project planning program that we have, in addition to other programs like our Arizona Green Business Certification Program, one rural business was able to do a lot with their project planning with us. They plan to put a whole action approach together, a really multi-level approach, and they've been able to work on that. And that includes reducing air leaks through windows and doors and walls, replacing greenhouse swamp coolers with models that are almost 50% more efficient, installing more efficient toilets, and acquiring sink aerators to save 16,000 gallons a month on water, as well as building shade being installed, and replacing air handling units in a greenhouse for 20% energy savings. So all of that has been able to help them for reducing energy needs and being able to reduce water needs and being able to achieve savings as well. So I think that's encouraging. Yeah, that's just one project plan through Scale Up. And that's a statewide program that we offer on a quarterly basis. It's cohort based, and we learn from each other as we get these projects underway.
And I want to ask, is this, how widespread is this shift in thinking toward a more sustainable business environment, for example? When I say business environment, just, physically, and as well as a strategic thinking toward a more sustainable future. How much work needs still to be done?
A lot. Yeah, as much as I can point to example after example across the state. Fortunately, I think that we have to do a whole lot more. Any one site can do more and reach those larger goals, like I mentioned. There's net zero, there's net positive. There's a lot we can do. There's the drawdown framework that I highly recommend looking at for prioritizing what actions will have the biggest impact, and I find it one of the best resources out there. And so there's big goals to achieve for any one site, any one facility, and that's where the incentives matter. The financing is very important to achieving larger goals and bundling projects together so that more can be done as a whole plan, really a whole building approach or whole site approach. And I think about site in terms of what can we do with back to water and how serious all this is, so they don't get to larger tier reductions. We can look at rainwater harvesting. We can look at stormwater management. We can look at gray water. Tucson, for example, has done a lot around looking at our on-site alternative water opportunities and conservation opportunities. So I want to highlight that because groups like Watershed Management Group are putting collaboratives together to explore regional planning and really putting it all on paper to act on. And it's encouraging.
I want to go to Dan. Dan, before Congress is a pretty big transportation bill that invests or seeks to invest billions of dollars into, among other places, clean energy, the environment, managing forest fires. Walk us through, from your perspective, what are the most salient points when it comes to sustainability, why they're important, not just to the country, but to Arizona?
Great, thanks, Luigi. So there's, it's important in this discussion to recognize that there's two pieces of legislation. So there's the infrastructure bill, which is a bipartisan bill, and we can certainly talk in some detail about that. And then there's what will come from reconciliation. So with regard to the bipartisan infrastructure bill, it's, as you said, it's a massive investment. It's a $1.3 trillion investment. And it is, as you said, it really has some very critical building blocks for climate change, for clean energy, for transportation, including some things that will be very relevant in Arizona. And I really do want to just take a minute to praise Senators Sinema and Kelly for their work to move this bill forward. And at the Nature Conservancy, we're certainly committed to getting it across the finish line. So a few things that I think are directly relevant to Arizona. There's a significant investment in the bill for the electric vehicle industry. There's $7.5 billion for the electric vehicle charging network. And in addition to that, there's $5 billion to help communities purchase electric buses in addition to the electric vehicle charging network. So that's important to Arizona for a few reasons. Of course, just in general, getting electric vehicles on the road is really helpful. It will reduce pollutants that come from tailpipes, but also, as we know in Arizona, we have a really thriving and budding electric vehicle industry. So incentives that encourage the use of electric vehicles would be great for us in Arizona from an economy standpoint. In addition, there's about $28 billion for modernizing the electric grid. In Arizona, we're fortunate. We have a very reliable grid right now, but what we'll need is a grid that will really allow us to integrate renewables that can be intermittent, to integrate batteries and battery storage. So grid modernization is very important as well in Arizona. And in addition, when we look beyond energy, there's a lot of funding that's related to resilience in there. So in particular, there's over $8 billion for something we were just talking about related to water infrastructure in the West. And that includes water storage, water recycling, desalination, a lot of important issues, as well as, I think, $300 million specifically for the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan, which really be beneficial for us in Arizona as well. And then the last point I'll make is that there's significant funding in the infrastructure bill for wildfire risk reduction, restoration and thinning in forests that are very at risk for wildfire. So there's a lot that's in this bill that is really critical for Arizona, not just from kind of a conservation and environmental perspective, but also from an economy-wide perspective.
Thank you for that, Dan. Representative Dunn, when you're looking at this infrastructure bill, and I'm sure you've had a chance to kind of survey at least the very broad points, what comes to your mind? And I think the second question I have for you is that when it comes to state level investment, what are we looking at potentially perhaps next year and over, say, let's say over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I had a good chance to look at the bill, and I talked to Senator Sinema personally a couple of weeks ago, thanking her for her work on it. You know, really like Dan had said, a lot of investment in the water for the river, the Colorado River, the electrical generation. So these are all good things. And we the state, we're going to look at, we hopefully have a robust budget. I think that there's, we only spent 160 million last year. I'm hoping that we I hate to put out a number, but it's going to be a big one. I'm hoping we can put in between 500 million and $1 billion in looking at new water sources and new infrastructure for helping to, it just depends on what our budget looks like. But yeah, we need to be bold and work on the future. So, one of the things that we did this last year is because of electric and battery storage. If people understand, commercial systems have batteries in our in our tax system for our renewable energy. We don't pay sales tax on that equipment. We pay it whenever you sell the electricity. Batteries weren't included in that. And so batteries, as you store the solar energy during the day, it exchanges that curve. So when everybody comes home at night and wants to turn their ACs on, we have that solar energy can be used a bit further into the evening. And as the batteries become developed and more efficient, they'll be able to last all night long. So that's a huge deal. We added that with the help of my colleagues and the governor. We added that to include it in the sales tax provision of that. So those kind of things, incremental, make a big difference in our technology as we keep the power costs cheaper and using that solar all night long instead of just during the day. So we're going to continue to look at those kind of things to help with transportation. Trying to get less cars on the road. So yeah, we're a big number. I'm hoping we can come up with for infrastructure for water.
And when you say a big number, are you thinking that might in fact happen, next year? Is that a possibility?
I'm only one of 60, but we did 160 million last year. Our budget looks good right now. I think we need to continue that number in discussions going out. 160 million. And remind you, these aren't monies that are designed to build the actual project. These are monies that we can hire people who work on what is it going to take to get the desalting plant with Mexico? What's it going to take to pump water, salt water from Mexico up to Tucson? What's it going to take to bring water from the Missouri, Mississippi River? I know that people think it might cost a lot, but you have to look at these things. It was the CAP was was a crazy idea when it was thought of, but we're relying on that. So what crazy idea are we looking at now that might seem like it's insurmountable or costly, prohibitive, but when you get it down to the cost per gallon, you won't notice it. And so that's the kind of things it lets understand the Mississippi, Missouri River. The flip side of that is you're taking flood water that is damaging people over there. So you get congressional delegations that say, if we can limit some of the damage in Davenport, Iowa, and put the water off the system, then that there's a win-win between then saving that damage and getting it out here. So that's the kind of things we're talking about with other states.
Thank you for that. Dr. Boon, we often, when we view sustainability, we often view that in terms of investments, right? What initiatives we fund, how will we fund them? Representative Dunn just mentioned about potential investments in figuring out what we can do with water. But I think, as you mentioned, sustainability also offers opportunities for long-term and high-paying jobs. Specifically, if you can talk about, what kinds of employment opportunities come with societal emphasis on sustainability. I guess another way of asking that would be if you look at your school and what your students are doing, and potentially they will, us as a society, will be using from your school in the future. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. When we first started graduating students from the School of Sustainability with a degree that no one had ever heard of, I have to admit we were a little concerned about how the market would receive it. But I think our timing was actually quite good in that when we started graduating students, there was a lot of interest in figuring out how sustainability could be a value add to private, public, and nonprofit sectors. So one of the things that we do, you go to our website, we publish the data we get from our alumni. And so even during the height of the recession, they were still heavily employed, which is wonderful to see. So it's a growth sector. I'm actually working with some colleagues now based on a National Academies of Sciences panel work that we did, where we're starting to track more rigorously the growth in sustainability careers. And I see them coming in on LinkedIn day after day after day. But one of the things that really struck me is that when we started graduating students, we expected they would go work for water agencies or energy or waste management, but you name a sector and they're working in it. So there was an early cluster of graduates who ended up working in the fashion industry. And so we're not training them in fashion. So what's going on here? At the time, it was really curious. But of course, when you look at what's going on with apparel companies, they care about resources, they care about labor conditions, they care about supply chains, they care about the ability to make sure that what they're doing, what their customers are asking for, it reflects what's going on with their products. So what's been really, really heartening is just to see that every sector, again, across private, public, and nonprofit, have been hiring students with these degrees. Now, the problem is that there still aren't enough programs in the country. So the demand for those kinds of skills is much, much higher than the supply. So one of the things that we're working on here at Arizona State University with universities around the country and indeed around the world is how do we start to educate more people in these fields to meet that growing demand.
I'm curious to know, what kind of work did your students actually do in the fashion industry? Do you have any insight as to the kinds of jobs that they're doing in this industry?
Well, they're doing a number of different things, but one of the things that they often end up doing and bringing to these organizations, and this is really important part of sustainability, is what we call systems thinking, right? So you can't separate water from energy, from food. I mean, they're all combined and integrated, right? One affects the other, much like an ecosystem. And traditionally, the way that we've trained people is to look at one of those separate from one another. So often in those organizations, they were the systems person. They were the people that brought the finance people together with the supply chain people together, with the design people together. And they became the translators to make sure that the organization was thinking systematically about what they're trying to achieve for their company, for their organization, but doing so in a way that was sustainable.
So they're doing synthesis for the organization, looking long term at how the company can actually be sustainable, especially in the apparel industry. I mean, there are so many components to what they do and what you need. And if you don't have a sustainable path, then your company's dead.
Yeah, and it's something that customers are asking for as well, right? So they are, in many ways, are responding to market demand. But there's also really forward-looking companies that they know if they're going to be competitive in the marketplace, that they need to take this seriously, not just check a box. The worst of that is called greenwashing. And people sniff that out pretty quickly. So the companies that are serious about it, that are seriously engaged in it, are the ones that are going to succeed.
Dan, I want to talk to you about Arizona Thrives. This is a new initiative that's for that Nature Conservancy is leading. Tell about what the goal is, and I guess more importantly, how do we get to that goal?
Yeah, thanks, Luigi. So Arizona Thrives is a statewide business and community-led alliance. So the Nature Conservancy launched it, but it really is led by an alliance of businesses and communities. Right now, we have over 80 member organizations, and the essential belief there is that together we can chart a path to carbon neutrality by 2050. And I think a key kind of framing of Arizona Thrives is that clean air, clean energy, and the economy all move forward together. And in fact, a lot of changes, as we've been talking about today, are going to happen in the energy sector. And so one of the things we're really focused on Arizona Thrives is how can we manage those changes for the best for the economy in Arizona and in our state. So that's really the focus there, is carbon neutrality by 2050. And I think a kind of a unique thing about the Arizona Thrives framing is that we're looking economy-wide when we think about decarbonization. So a lot of times discussion around decarbonization is really about the electric sector and the utilities. And certainly that's a piece of it, but that's actually about less than half of the carbon emissions in the state. And there's a really robust process right now going on statewide about the 2070 carbon goals at the Corporation Commission. So that's a piece of it. But at Arizona Thrives, we are also looking much more broadly. So we're looking, for example, at how we move. We have a work stream around how we move. We have a work stream around buildings, and we call it where we live and work. And we're looking at everything together to really think about, how do all those things come together to lead to carbon neutrality by 2050. And, for example, a building that's constructed today is going to be in use beyond the year 2050. And so depending on the energy efficiency decisions that are made right now, that will have impact for decades into the future. Similarly, as companies decide about make fleet decisions and decide what kinds of vehicles to put on the road, those could be in place for 20 years. So we're really, again, looking economy-wide through Arizona Thrives.
And thank you for that, Dan. How do you, just really briefly, how do you balance the fact that we're moving toward, carbon-less or fewer carbon imprint, with the fact that some of these technologies that we're looking at might be quite expensive? I mean, you're thinking about solar energy to begin with. They started out really expensive. Now they're much cheaper, but they're still quite expensive. You look at an electric vehicle, those are not cheap. Look at battery storage, that's not cheap either.
Well, that's absolutely true. And so I think, I would say that, first of all, we have seen, and you alluded to this, very dramatic reductions in cost for solar and in battery storage. What's possible now wasn't possible 5 or 10 years ago from both a technology perspective and a cost perspective. So we can't even, all kinds of things 10 or 15 years from now will be possible that we haven't yet thought about. So there's a lot that will happen with innovation. And I do think this also really gets to the importance of the discussion we were having before about the infrastructure bill, that really well-designed programs and incentives and spending can accelerate the pace of some of that innovation, of some of that technology change that we need to see. So I think it will happen over time, but it also needs to be accelerated. And the infrastructure bill is an opportunity to do that.
I want to add to that.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think it's great to see that there may be investment in a new dislocated workers program and sector-based training and other strategies like that. A clean energy and sustainability accelerator as well. I think 27 billion for that, and particularly focused on areas that have not had as much investment, disadvantaged communities. And so I think that the more we can work on existing efforts in related to homes, for example, and the weatherization assistance program being bolstered, and there's a lot there that we could do to shift our focus from new development and the impact that it has on our climate issues, major impact, to what we can do within our own economy, in our own communities, to create new economic opportunities around energy efficiency, water conservation, transportation reductions, electric vehicles. I think that's a great opportunity, as long as we consider the holistic approaches, the supply chain, the entire approach to EVs, and other alternative transportation methods as well, including e-bikes. I think we have to have holistic approaches to sustainability across the board. And so it's encouraging to see those different points being emphasized in the bill potentially, and we'll see where that goes. And everybody can play a role out there to write and email and call about getting these investments passed.
Thank you for that. We're going to go to some of our audience questions. We're going to try and answer maybe 2 or 3, something like that. Representative Dunn, I want to start with you. There is a sentiment out there, if you will, that maybe the legislature is not doing enough on the sustainable front. There was a question about, we kind of figure out what the kinds of things that we want to see that would put us on a sustainable path. That legislature maybe not working to go meet those desires, if you will, but also the kinds of investments that we need for a sustainable future. Can you give us a sense, well, first of all, what do you think of this question, the sense that maybe the legislature is not doing enough?
Well, I think as you look at what we are doing, and people just want some sweeping changes or some, new statutes and new rules. But if you go, and I know there was questions in the chat about for homeowners and trying to do more efficiency stuff, most of the homes being built now are more efficient than what the standards are. So maybe we need to look at sending that message that, we require homes to have these certain efficiency standards on water and energy, because I think they're already meeting those standards as it is. But then that sends the message so people know when they're looking that we have these requirements, even though we're already meeting those issues, And when you talk about what we're doing with reclaimed water, we're actually putting the reclaimed water in the ground, mixing it and pumping it back out. But we might need to do that, toilet to tap situation faster, because a lot of questions about what are we doing for water and how are we going to continue this growth. If you go back to the amount of water we use for the last 20 years, we've been pretty much, if you talk to any of the water providers, there have growth through conservation. And so we're getting more homes, more businesses, more manufacturing with less water. So that's to answer the question, how are you going to continue to grow this economy? Well, you continue growing it through conservation measures and better use of the existing resources we have. And that's what we will do. And we'll continue as a legislator to invest in those studies and some of those looking at some of those requirements.
Thank you for that. Dr. Boon, I want to ask you, there's a lot of questions, not just in this morning scoop and in previous ones, about the fact that we are growing our population, especially in Metro Phoenix. And we were expected to add a couple million people over the next 10, 20 years, something like that. When you look at the challenges that we have, the challenges of water supply, for example, the fact that we're attracting residential, people to come into our state, what do you see? I guess the question I want to ask you is, should we stop people from coming to Arizona? I guess the way to put
it. No, we should not. If anybody wants to stop people from coming to Arizona, they should move out of Arizona. So often people want other people to sacrifice, not themselves. So that's lesson number 1. And secondly, to what the representative just said, we have been smart, and we need to be smarter about how we work in an ecosystem that, it's a place of amazing natural beauty, but it also has limits, and we need to work within those limits. And that doesn't mean, again, that, we have to wear hair shirts and walk around depressed. There's, I think, huge opportunities for amazing, extraordinary livelihoods and meaning for the people of Arizona that are here now and that will be coming here in the future.
And with that, I think we're at 9 o'clock. I think this is a good time to end the program. I want to thank you again for spending your hour with us. Dan, thank you so much for your time. Representative Dunn, thank you so much. Mike, thank you so much. Dr. Boon, thank you so much for being so gracious with your time. And of course, to our sponsors, the Center for the Future of Arizona and the Nature Conservancy, thank you for your engagement. And to our viewers and our listeners, thank you for your time. We truly appreciate it. We will be posting a video recording of this morning scoop on our website, and we will let you know what that link is. And with that, I just want to say thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.